Adolf Hitler wasn't the only madman to rule over Germany. Kaiser Wilhelm II led Germany to its destruction in World War I. Crippled since birth with a useless arm, Kaiser Wilhelm was the grandson of Queen Victoria and the great-uncle of today's Queen Elizabeth II. It was no accident that Kaiser Wilhelm chose Max Warburg as head of Germany's Secret Service. The Warburgs and the Rothschilds controlled Germany's central bank, called the Reichsbank, which was founded by Mayer Rothschild. While Max and Felix Warburg helped finance Germany in World War I, their brother Paul Warburg of Kuhn and Loeb helped finance the American side by selling war bonds through the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank. The Rothschild and Warburg printing presses worked tirelessly on both sides of the Atlantic, rolling out debt money. Germany won the First World War by 1916 without a single shot being fired on German soil. British convoys were blown out of the Atlantic by German subs, the French army mutinied, and the Russian army was defecting. With British Prime Minister Lloyd George up against a wall, Lionel Rothschild and the Jewish Zionists offered the British a deal they couldn't refuse. "We'll bring the United States into the war as your ally and win the war for you," they said, "if you'll promise us Palestine." In April of 1917, President Wilson got the green light and declared war on Germany. Because of overwhelming opposition to the war, Wilson invoked the draft and passed the Espionage Act, forcing Americans to fight or be thrown in jail. Billions of U.S. taxpayers' money was delivered to the British war machine, money that was never repaid. In return, the British government wrote the famous Balfour Declaration and addressed it to none other than Lord Lionel Rothschild. The declaration promised Palestine and Israel to the Rothschild Zionists. The Zionists believe that they are entitled to the land of Israel because, according to the Bible, Israel was promised to the Jews by God, and according to the Bible, the Jews are God's chosen race of people, a race favored by God above all others.
1817, Lord Allenby conquered the Holy Land, and the Jews were promised a national home in Palestine by the Earl of Balfour, a policy endorsed by Woodrow Wilson and by the League of Nations, which made Palestine a British mandate.
The Versailles Treaty negotiations after World War I were held behind closed doors at the luxurious private mansion of yet another Rothschild family member named Edmund Rothschild. Treaty negotiators included Rothschild agent Paul Warburg as a United States delegate and Paul's brother Max Warburg as a German delegate.
Clemenceau, Lord George, and President Wilson have pulled up armchairs and crouched low over the map. It is appalling that these ignorant and irresponsible men should be cutting Asia Minor to bits as if they were dividing a cake. During the afternoon, there is the final revision of the frontiers of Austria. Hungary is partitioned, indolently, irresponsibly partitioned. Then the Wislar frontier. Then tea and macaroons.
The Versailles Peace Treaty forced Germany to accept guilt for the war. As punishment, Germany lost its army, navy, and colonies and had to pay the cost of the war through a debt to the gangster banksters that could never be repaid. World War I killed 9 million soldiers, injured, crippled, and impoverished millions, and collapsed 4 empires with large parts of France, Belgium, and Russia left devastated. Wars throughout history have always been waged by the ruling master class for conquest, power, and profit, and the subject class have always fought their battles. It wasn't until the close of World War I that soldiers began to ask why they were killing and being killed. The League of Nations was the money cartel's first attempt at world control. but Tsar Nicholas II of Russia caught on to their plot and sabotaged it. That proved to be a deadly mistake. Schiff, Warburg, Rockefeller, Harriman, and Morgan backed the uprisings that led to the 1917 Russian Revolution. Their strategy was to finance both sides of wars and revolutions, which gave them control over the winners, the losers, and the outcome.
The execution and removal of the bodies took 20 minutes. 3 centuries of Tsarist Russia were gone.
In his book, Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler, Professor Anthony B. Sutton shows documented evidence that U.S. corporations supplied money, gas, vehicles, and weaponry that helped Hitler launch World War II. Prescott Bush, father of George Bush and grandfather of George W. Bush, supplied raw materials and funneled vast sums of money and credit to Hitler's Third Reich. Under Trading with the Enemies Act, the U.S. government seized businesses operated by Prescott Bush and Skull and Bonesman Averell Harriman, including New York's Union Banking Corporation. These seizures were based on evidence that Bush and Harriman had been operating front organizations for Hitler's Third Reich. Their German partner was the notorious Nazi industrialist named Fritz Thyssen, who wrote a book of confessions called I Paid Hitler. Professor Sutton lists Rockefeller Standard Oil, Henry Ford's Ford Motor Company, J.P. Morgan's General Electric, ITT, and the DuPonts as suppliers for Germany's rearmament program. But why on earth would Jewish bankers and corporations finance a monster like Adolf Hitler? It is a well-known fact that Adolf Hitler went to great lengths to cover up his family history, even arranging for the assassination of Austrian Chancellor Dollfuss, who investigated Hitler's family. The Dollfuss file, now in the hands of the British Secret Service, revealed that Adolf Hitler's grandmother, named Maria Anna Schicklgruber, worked in Vienna as a live-in housemaid at Solomon Rothschild's manor next to his hotel. The information was traced through her compulsory registration card. Solomon Rothschild was one of Mayor Rothschild's 5 banker sons. Separated from his wife, Solomon had a reputation with police as a lecherous womanizer. When Maria Anna Schicklgruber's pregnancy was discovered, she was dismissed. Adolf Hitler, the grandson of Solomon Rothschild, earned a reputation as the most evil man the world has ever known. But more evil than Adolf Hitler were the men who created and financed him. Hitler's revolutionary activities in Germany landed him in prison for 5 years. This so-called prison was Landsberg Castle, a comfortable, privileged pastoral setting where Hitler was groomed for the job of Führer. His coaches, Rudolf Hess and Hermann Göring, helped him write the infamous book Mein Kampf. Upon his release, the book was widely circulated, and Hitler traveled throughout Germany, delivering prepared speeches with Rothschild Warburg financing via the secret Thule and Veril societies. The Jews were to blame, shouted Hitler, for the humiliation of the Versailles Treaty and for Germany's financial ruin. What possible explanation could there be for Jewish businessmen supporting an anti-Semitic madman like Adolf Hitler and the extermination of millions of innocent Jews? One of the world's dirtiest secrets is that the exterminated Jews in Nazi Germany were not considered real Jews. They were considered Khazar Russians and Eastern Europeans whose ancestors converted to Judaism in 740 AD under their king, King Bulan. Their bloodline dates back to the Turkish tribes and to the powerful empire of Khazaria that once controlled all of Russia. Arthur Kessler, who wrote The 13th Tribe, claims that over 90% of today's Jews are racially non-Jewish and have no genetic relationship to the 12 tribes of Israel. Today's Jews, says Kessler, are more related to Attila the Hun than King Solomon of Israel. 2,000 years ago, when the Roman conquerors evicted the 12 tribes from Israel, the largest tribes, called Dan and Naphtali, settled in Denmark and Norway. Their Viking king, called King Canute, was crowned king of England, Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Kessler calls the majority of today's Jews the 13th tribe because they are racially not Jewish. The Rothschilds' incestuous bloodline can be traced through their ancestor, Naphtali Hertz, who is named after their tribe of Naphtali. Over the centuries, the Rothschilds have intermarried with authentic Jewish royalty, ensuring their bloodline back to King Solomon of Israel. Denmark, which literally means the mark of Dan, maintained a truce with Germany's Nazi occupying forces for nearly 3 years. When Hitler's SS moved to arrest the Jews of Denmark, the Danish government helped ferry them to safety in Sweden and Britain. The international banksters who had sponsored the genocide, torture, and suffering of non-ethnic Jews stole their wealth from Swiss bank accounts, just as they had stolen the wealth of the Russian czars after financing the Russian Revolution. The Vatican was also tied to plundering Nazi gold, which had been stolen from the Jews. It is a well-documented fact that Pope Pius XII lent his support to the anti-Semitic Hitler and his Nazi regime. With the fall of Nazi Germany, the Rothschilds wasted no time waving their Balfour Declaration at the British government and reminding them of their written promise to give them Palestine. But how could the British promise the Arab land of Palestine to the Jews? In 1917, the British parachuted free opium and hashish to the Turkish troops and stole Palestine from them.
One ingenious stratagem was to parachute hashish and opium to the Turkish troops to try to keep their mind off the fighting. Allenby's strategy worked brilliantly.
During World War II, the British needed Arab oil and signed an agreement with the Arabs which forbid Jewish immigration into Palestine. Then at the end of the war, the British broke their agreement with the Arabs and allowed the Rothschild Jewish Zionists to smuggle hundreds of thousands of Jews from around the world into Palestine. To win public support, the Rothschilds, who owned Reuters and the Associated Press, bombarded their media empire with images of homeless Jewish Holocaust refugees crowded together in ships off the coast of Palestine. On October 24, 1945, the bankster pirates gave birth to their most powerful weapon of global control, the United Nations. According to plan, the British pulled out of Palestine and gave the land to the Jewish Zionists. These Zionist extremists call themselves God's chosen race of people and believe they have a God-given right to the land of the Palestinians. It is important to know that the land now called Israel was originally called Canaan in ancient times. Canaan was populated by the Canaanite people, who were the ancestors of today's Palestinians imprisoned in refugee camps in Israel. About 3,500 years ago, the Semitic Hyksos kings ruled Egypt for 100 years, but were expelled from Egypt into Canaan. The Egyptians called these Hyksos people the Habarus, which means Hebrews. These expelled Hebrews invaded and conquered the land of Canaan and changed the name of the land from Canaan to Israel. In 135 AD, the name was once again changed to Palestine after the Romans conquered the land. In 1948, the bankster-controlled United Nations officially turned Palestine into the Zionist State of Israel. To deal with the millions of Palestinian residents, the Israeli Jews massacred and drove them from their villages and homeland. The Jews herded the Palestinians into two separated regions called the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. The Rothschilds soon began financing Jewish Holocaust refugees to build illegal Jewish settlements on Palestinian land. These illegal Jewish settlements set the stage for Israel's Prime Minister Ariel Sharon's reign of terror against Palestinians who dared to defend what was left of their stolen homeland. Like Saddam Hussein, Sharon violated dozens of UN resolutions by using hundreds of tanks and American-supplied gunships and planes in an unrelenting campaign of bombing, murdering, bulldozing, starving, and terrorizing the Palestinians off of what remained of their land. In violation of international law, Israel also secretly developed over 100 nuclear weapons of mass destruction capable of vaporizing the entire Middle East. Defenseless against Israel's U.S.-backed military and media campaign, the Palestinian Muslims fought back with sticks and stones and suicide as their only means of defense against the wholesale theft of their ancient homeland. The story of the Bible was written by Hebrew Jews, who tell us that the Hebrew Jews are God's chosen race of people. Bible prophecy predicts that they will one day rule the world from their temple throne in Jerusalem, and that the world's King of Kings will be a descendant of King David and King Solomon of Israel. That is what Bible believers all over the world believe will come to pass. To turn this Bible prophecy into a reality would demand the cooperation of world leaders. It would also mean building a third temple in Jerusalem over the ancient ruins of King Solomon's temple. But there is one giant-sized problem. A sacred Muslim shrine called Dome of the Rock was already built on top of the ruins of Solomon's temple in the 7th century. It still stands majestically today in the heart of Jerusalem, and it would have to be destroyed.